Any questions about this process and the requirements? The elected officials will listen to any input that any of you have on future changes. But for this year, the program is already set and will be administered as listed in the code. We will monitor the administrative side of the program and discuss it later this year. When you come up to the podium to speak, for those that have signed in or anyone that wants to come speak, we didn't do the sign in tonight since it's a special meeting. So we just ask that you come to the podium. When you do, please state your name and your address and approximately the number of units that you have. And please be respectful in all of your comments. If you have questions about the process, we will try to have city staff answer those the best we can. And if we cannot answer them tonight, we will get back to you. So this is really an opportunity for you all to approach us with questions. I think we're probably going to start, Lisa, by having Phil go over the process a little bit more in program.
I didn't prepare anything. Again, I'm here to answer your questions. Is everybody a landlord? How many landlords we have here? Has everybody been through one of my inspections? So, okay. So, I didn't prepare anything for tonight. I just know that you are all familiar with my inspection, the process, the things that I look at. So, if anybody thinks that they're unfair or unreasonable, I guess you can let me know. I think I'm pretty fair, reasonable. So I'm just here for questions and answers. So if you have a specific question, I'll look in the book and see if I can't get you an answer. But as far as preparing anything, it's very similar to before. Your safety issues, general maintenance and things of that nature.
I just also want to back up just a smidge. When this program was first established, it was based on the 2015 state approved codes for property maintenance. The council did approve an upgrade to the 2018 codes back in 2023, early 2023. So that means all building codes and all property maintenance codes have to abide by what the state is following currently. Listed in the 2018 manual. And so I know one issue that our landlords have had is they would like to have a list or an identification of what all is going to be in an inspection by categories. And I think you provided that to us.
Everybody
here
make sure you get this. At the top, it says property maintenance code compliance, what to expect when you're inspected. So make sure you got that. That was not in the mailer that we sent out. And then the ordinance that's on the table there is the one that the mayor referred to. The one that we sent you would have referred to this 15 property maintenance code. This one says 18. For anybody that doesn't come tonight, we'll remail it out. There's only a very few amount of changes, but it does refer to a different amount. So there's a new copy of that. And then everything else in your packet would have been the application with the cover letter and then the resolution for the fees, which is the $145 for a single family home and $100 per unit if it's in an apartment complex. A little bit different than last year, even though there is a reinspection fee on there. If he just has to come back quickly to check something to make sure it's done, then we will not bill you the extra $50. That $145 for a single family should be enough if you just have to buzz back quickly. If it's a lot of back and forth or things are not done once he gets back, then we would bill you again $50.
And just to clarify that 145 or that 100 per unit, that's this year. It's not every year you're charged for those units. This is just a one-time fee for 3 years of the occupancy permit for those units.
Correct.
In case there was any confusion on that.
I think in the past, Phil waited until April to do inspections. He's happy to start doing them now. So when you get it in, we can have him call you right away. I think part of why Phil waited was warmer weather for exterior things. You know, if you're willing to have us come sooner just to get more off the list and then you need more time because it is an exterior thing that doesn't work well in the winter, then I think Phil's timeline for you would be appropriately measured out to make sure that the weather is appropriate for what you need to do. If it's interior stuff, then it would just be a normal 30 days or whatever you give them.
And for some landlords that have multiple units, I think we tried to divide them up a third this year, a third the next round, and a third the year after that.
We didn't do that as well as we could have.
Okay,
So those that have a high number, it's spread out a little bit more for their timeline.
got it, good. Okay,
Anybody on the council have anything? Otherwise, we can just open it up for people to come up and start asking questions. Anybody want to come up and ask questions?
First of all, thank you guys for having the meeting, getting everybody together. I've heard a lot about having a meeting and having some input kind of put out that already put in place before we walk up here and have this meeting, because I was in part of it originally back in like 2015. You know, it was a whole different, it was sold as a whole different ballgame. It was sold as a clean up the house, it was appearance, so we was gonna take care of the furniture, and it was a safety, which meant your smoke detectors, blow off tubes, railings, you know, basic stuff like that. And that's what everybody agreed to back in 2015 when all this started out of the gate. I see along the way it has blossomed, I guess you would say. And I guess my question, first of all, is how many of you guys live in a house that I see on the list that haven't set a cup on the window seal and got peeling paint up there? And, you know, a little, it comes up from that, or, you know, the outside of your house has chip paint. Is that something that's gonna be, right, if there's chip, I see it in there, if there's chip paint, is that, you know, a red flag, it's a write-up, or is that something to say, well, address it? You know, I just want a lot more clarity on when you show up. You know, what we can expect, and I don't think there's a lot of homeowners in this room that have spent a lot of money and dedication to this town, and they're the taxpayers that elect everybody. And I think they need to know what to expect. And, you know, be fair with it. And you guys you're talking to us, and I very well appreciate that. Even as far as breaking up the units, at one time it was like Ratliff to Oak to Washington, to, you know, Park down there. Is that still the way it's broke up, or we changed that around?
Well, I think we have, it's not geographical anymore, because there's some landlords that have properties in all three sections.
Sure.
And
that
talking to
broke it
them,
up.
yeah, and they've preferred to do them all at one time. So some of them got shifted, some of them got ignored. So right now, we've just basically got them in 3-year increments. So if you were inspected in 2017, expect in 2020, 2023, 2026. And some people took 3 years to,
And which it broke up, and quite frankly, I started the program
okay,
and it turned into a big mess and nobody knew what was going on in City Hall. So I told them that I'm opting out until we all get on the same page. And nobody would have a meeting to even say, hey, this is the page we need to be on, and let's start here. I'm a homeowner, property taxpayer, and I thought I deserved that.
Sure.
As long as everybody out here. And I just want to know from the end of it, if the councilman and everybody, they've talked to people in their areas too. That's how you got elected. I hope you talk to everybody and landlords in your area. And that's what you go off. I guess the other thing that really bites me is I put a lot of money in the property, and I walk out my back door, and I'll take all of you on a ride at properties. I can walk out back doors, and I look at myself and I say, why? It's piled full of trash, it's piled full of, you know, everything. And I think everybody in here can contest to that, and you. I was actually city superintendent for 11 years. So I drove these streets, I did the alleys, I know where it's at. And, again, I thank you for that, but them are my thoughts. And what I would like clarified is, like, which ones, are they all gonna get thrown on there? You're gonna get time to bring all of them with a checklist. Type of deal, and that'd be,
Did you get a letter from me with some of your properties on there?
yes, I did.
Okay, so whichever ones you got are the ones that are in for this year, so.
Okay, so it's just all over town, whichever ones you guys picked out.
Whichever ones were the oldest, some of them haven't been in since 2017
Well,
or
with
8.
COVID and stuff going on, nothing was in. You guys couldn't get in the house. I paid for inspections and they didn't even go in the house because of COVID and they get off and all that. I mean, I got virtually nothing out of that money.
What's your name?
Dwayne Adams.
Yeah, so can we back up, Dwayne? Tell us where you live and how many properties you have.
I actually live north of town on farm. I've got approximately 10 here in town right now.
Yeah.
I bought houses, I've cleared them down on my own dime to clean up the town, I cleared lots off. I've put a lot of money in this town and never said a word about it.
No, I appreciate that. That was just what we asked is when you come to the podium, just state your name, where you live and how many units you have. That way, you know, we kind of know what's going on.
Yeah, and I know most of you.
Yeah.
I know most of you.
Well, and I'd like to approach, back in 2017, when I was the economic developer, I was aware that the program had been put in place. I was also told that they started out with those first inspections, pretty much just to kind of hit the big things. And then they were going to get more picky, I guess, as those years went on to get to all of the things that are covered in the code. So I think that might be kind of how it was
And
originally
it was
sold.
sold to the whole community though.
Yeah,
As a appearance and safety
Yeah.
issues for the tenants. It
Yeah.
wasn't sold as, we're going to be at Omaha, and we're gonna run in and, you know, redo all your houses.
So I have to agree with Dwayne on a couple of points, and because I was attending those meetings at the time. And I wasn't a member of the council at the time, but I was attending the meetings, and it was kind of sold on a little different perspective, and it was kind of sold differently every time it was talked about. So it was, you know, when it was set up, it was a little confusing. I will say that for sure, but I will say this, and I don't know that anybody in the room would disagree with this, that as much of a commotion as it's caused, it has improved the quality of our rental inventory in the city. And I mean, I see it, I assume everybody else sees it as well. And so, you know, it has brought some quality of life to our community as well, along with the confusion and some discontent that it's brought as well.
and I think
Thanks,
that,
Dwayne.
yes, thank you. I think another big thing was that there were some landlords that were following everything to the T, and others that weren't and weren't being held accountable somehow. And so I think that's why the council's been talking about this for a while, trying to figure out how to get consistency, get a process with SWIPCO. We've had many meetings with SWIPCO to discuss the fee structures, to discuss the process, to discuss what things are inspected and all of that. So
Can
what
you
can,
address the paint chips?
yes, can you address the
It's
paint?
gonna be an issue. It's in the it's everything that's chipping and peeling like that, we have to assume that it's lead-based paint. And that's
Interior
not safe.
or exterior? both?
Interior, exterior, anything like that, especially if there's kids involved. If there's kids there, then yes, it's gonna have to be addressed. You have to understand, this 2018 property maintenance minimum standards. So if you don't meet those standards, then it needs to be corrected.
But one cup on one windowsill, if all your paint was great and one little window.
I haven't
Yeah,
encountered that.
Right, I don't feel like
so.
that's the common, I wouldn't think that's correct.
Yeah.
And back in 17, the last ones I let SWIPCO in on, it was exactly that. It was one cup on a windowsill that got wrote up on.
And you know, I don't know that anybody up here at this table would disagree with this either. Maybe you do. I don't think we're here to penalize or try to make anybody's life difficult as a property owner or a landlord. I think we're here just to make sure that, you know, that the improvements that we've made to our housing inventory will continue and, you know, continue to make our property values, you know, worth more and make our community a little more attractive place to live. I mean, hopefully that's the whole thing. I don't think anybody's up here wanting to punish anybody or make it any more difficult. So I don't know how we work on that, Bill. I mean, mean, some of this is, I don't know. I don't know how that works.
I would say it's health, safety and visual. I mean, it is. It's part of our visual
The
strategy
people that
as
showed
well.
up here tonight, they care. They want the
That's right.
properties to be good.
That's right.
And we got a lot of good people out here and they want the properties to be really nice. And I know the people here are doing a good job with keeping it up, so.
And we appreciate all of you who are reinvesting and improving and upgrading by all means, so.
I know one call I got was that someone kind of made it seem like in the past that they didn't comply because they knew that other people weren't being treated equally. And that all we can assure you now is there's no wishy-washiness. It's not about who you are. Landlords are landlords, and so we'll treat people the same. We'll treat people equally. Again, it's not as a punishment, but rules have to be, it doesn't say if you're someone special that the rule doesn't apply to you. And so hopefully everyone knows that, you know, we will be following up. I think that's kind of been, unfortunately, not just this program, but there's other programs in the past that were like that. And so we're gonna do our best to make sure that everyone's treated fairly and equally so that it isn't, because again, to Adam's point, the people that come to the meeting are probably the ones that are doing the best with their properties, and the ones who perhaps are not here are the biggest households that might have issues. And so we'll treat everybody fairly. And, you know, Phil's gonna go through the code, and then, you know, I guess what I would say is this is what the rules are for today. I certainly, you know, I came after the rules were in place, and so that's my job to enforce them, but we'll keep an open mind. If we get through the first year and it seems like we need to make some tweaks, then we can look at those. But for now, you know, it is the rules that it is, and that we need to proceed, and we'll always have an open mind because sometimes rules make sense to change. So.
Yes, my name is Ronald Gang. I have one property. But my question is, what about the rest of these 2,000 homes in rental? What are we going to do? Are we going to inspect every one of these homes, make sure that they're livable for young children, older people, and stuff like this?
Are you saying if they're owner occupied?
The owner occupied. They can still live on rental. Is any different than any of these other?
I think the basis of the law when it comes to rental inspections is that if you choose to live in a place that you choose to live like that you have control over that. And when it's a rental, the person who lives there doesn't.
Well, a young child that lives in this place that might have this chippy lead paint or some other safety issue. Where are you at?
Well, and that's a very good point, because a lot of this rental inspection stuff came up. Some of our, I would call them less than, I don't know. They weren't cooperating with the program, and instead of having rental properties, they sold them on land contracts. So they're basically still just rentals, and they're still in the same condition as they were before. They're just. So I understand what you're saying.
Well, I see a lot of the bad looking houses.
Yeah, and you know, we do have a full-time nuisance officer, and he does a very good job of trying to curtail some of that, but I mean, he is limited to what he can do. He can't go inside the homes. It's strictly, you know, appearance on the outside. But I understand what you're saying, 100%.
Well, if you can come inside my rental, you can surely go inside another.
Building inspections.
Well, I guess that's what I have to say. I think some of the fines are excessive.
Nobody wants to get a fine. The fine is if you say it's $20, then people just pay it. So the point is to try and get compliance, not to actually charge.
Well, it didn't feel that way. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else have questions? Comments?
I'd like to say something, but I don't feel like standing at that podium because my back is just killing me. First of all, we did have inspections in 22.
Shirley, who are you? Where do you live, and how many houses do you have?
901 East Corning Street, and everybody knows me.
How many units do you have, Shirley?
What?
How many units do you have?
How many rental units?
I'm 10, just a minute. 24, and my son owns, well, he owns half of it, and one of 4. So it's between my son and I.
I see, thank you.
And he doesn't live here. So grandma
I'm
has,
gonna take your word for everything. How's that?
grandma has to take care of everything. But anyway, I just want to tell you that, and there's something else I want to tell you people. And you're probably not interested in it, but you know, some people sued in Orange City, in Iowa. Because they were renting a place and they didn't want anybody to come in to inspect it. Well, the court ruled that they didn't have to let them come in, and they only have inspections every 5 years. Well, they took it to Supreme Court, and right here's the answer. I had Brian look it up today, and it was filed December 20th, that the Supreme Court overruled that and threw it out. So they have to have the inspections. And that's the way it is. If we're gonna have the law that we're gonna have inspections, which we're only required to do if you have a certain population. But anyway, it was very interesting to see that, because a person in Red Oak here had been following this when that went through first time. Well, now the Supreme Court on December 20th reversed it all.
At the Iowa State Supreme Court.
Yes.
Thank you for
You know,
sharing that.
sometimes those lawsuits happen because of how they're administered. I think maybe Phil had told me that it was like, people weren't being notified. They were just knocking on people's doors, wasn't there? So it wasn't like talking to your landlord and then the landlord says something. I think the other thing that Phil had mentioned in the past was that he would set up an appointment, say with you as the landlord, like 10 days in advance. And then the person, a tenant who's there, Phil would have gotten the impression that in some cases, the person barely had any notice. And so I would just encourage you that as you get notice, if you know it's 10 days in advance, try to make sure that your tenants get as much notice, just out of respect for them. So, you know, Phil doesn't care if the house is messy. I think there's people that think we're looking for things from a police perspective, like if someone's smoking pot in their house, obviously it's not legal in Iowa, but if he sees something like that, that's not what's gonna be part of that. And hopefully you can reassure your tenants. If your tenants have questions after you let them know, they're certainly also welcome to call City Hall and we'll try to alleviate their concerns about it, that we're not there to, you know, simply to look at the way people are living. It's just to look at the structure and the code issues. Anything else that people want to add?
My name's John Blay. We got 6 rentals with my son. Does the city have an count of how many rental properties there are in Red Oak?
We know that it's about 53%, John, 52 point something to 53.
How many houses?
That should be right around 1,450 houses.
So we have
Or units. I
I was
mean, you
gonna
know,
say
it
that's
could be,
units.
you know, multiple units in
how many rental units do we have?
53%
Of
of our housing
Or
stock.
rental.
how many inspections do you do in Atlantic, Bill?
0.
So you don't do any inspections in Atlantic?
I do them for Villisca, Malvern, Red Oak, Missouri Valley. Stanton is gonna start, or no, it's not Stanton, Sydney is gonna
They don't
start.
do them in Atlantic?
The city council doesn't like them.
They had it though, right?
What's the population of Atlantic?
7,200.
So they're bigger than us.
Mhm.
They have no rental inspection program.
They need one. And we've pushed, but they won't accept it.
So I think this is true that you, by law in Iowa, you don't have to have an inspection program unless you're bigger than 15,000.
It's definitely a choice. It's a choice that the council's made.
So out of the number of rental units we have, how many are actually inspected? How many have rental certificates? And is there a database that shows that?
So we have none that have a certificate right now because I don't know what Shirley's talking about with 22.
There were a few done, I think, just a few.
So maybe it was random,
Handful.
but for the most part, there's nothing that's been done since COVID. And
Okay,
so
Pre-COVID, COVID 2020, what percentage of the rental inspections were completed?
About 70%, John. That's
So
to my
there's
best calculations, it's about 70%.
30% of the rentals that have never been
That
inspected.
you're absolutely correct about that. And you know, you guys can look around the room, you know, who are major property owners that are not here, that, you know, their properties would probably benefit from the inspections the most. So, you know, and that's probably where the biggest percentage of that 30% lies. So how do we get them to comply? I'm not sure about that, but
Well, there's a penalty per day.
Now there's a
Well, that's
penalty
what the
per
big
day.
penalties are for, to get someone's attention.
yeah, but you're absolutely right, John. There's like
Well, this rental
70%.
program has not changed the way I do anything at all. It has not improved my properties because every property that we've done is completely painted, new carpet and everything before anybody ever moves in. This program has not changed one thing about how I treat my properties. And I would say the majority of the people here is probably the same thing. And I think most of our issue in town is not necessarily rental properties. Because I can walk out my back door and see houses that aren't rentals that are worse than mine.
You know, I agree with that. And at one time, I do believe that, that rental properties was a bigger problem than they are now. But I think that a lot of that is a direct result of our ordinance. I'm with you though, 100%. I think we need 100% enforcement on it. I don't know how to achieve that.
I'm not sure you can.
Well,
Because I do think the Fourth Amendment of the US Constitution says people have privacy in their own home. And even if they don't own that, that is their dwelling.
But that's what the Supreme Court.
well,
said.
Shirley just
We have
talked
a right.
about that.
That's Iowa Supreme Court.
Yeah.
The US Supreme Court, Fourth Amendment says you have the privacy to write in your own home and your own papers. I don't think you really have the authority to really push that through, really.
You do as long as I give notice or you give notice. The only thing that makes it illegal is when you don't announce it. And or if someone comes in and seizes something, that's the illegal search and seizure. Shirley can verify it for me, but that's what makes it an illegal search and seizure. If you don't know I'm coming and I'm gonna see something that I see that shouldn't be there, that's what makes it illegal. If you give proper notice, we have every right to be there.
So if we're truly gonna do this and we're gonna enforce it 100%, would there be an online database that if I were a prospective renter, that I could look up and see if that house has a certificate? And see how many houses are actually inspected and completed?
I think that's a great idea,
But
John.
needs to happen.
we had, Christie had.
Right, but that's not an online
But it's not an
database.
online
I would say I'd
database.
be.
Yeah.
Like, it's a great goal. I just wouldn't automatically put what we have on there now because it's not a perfect science. And once we get like each one, then we can start listing them.
But are they able to come to City Hall?
If I came
I
to
mean, it's
town, how would I
public
know if a house that I'm looking at has been inspected? How would I know if it's safe? I have to call City Hall every time I want to look at a different house?
I mean, we can, we're not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying that because nothing's been done for so many years. Like, obviously, no one has a certificate right now. So we don't want to post on there like, hey, great, none of our houses have been inspected.
That is correct. City Hall would have a record of if it was inspected, when it was inspected, and if it
I
earned its
guess my question
certificate.
is, in the past, how many of those have actually been done?
That's what we're telling you, is it wasn't a good system
Mhm.
because people ignored us. They ignored us about a lot of things.
A lot of things.
Water bills, I just shut off somebody with a $2,700 water bill last week. Think about how many months it takes. Because we had tools in our toolbox that we ignored. And that is just the way it's been, and that isn't the way it is gonna be going forward. And the people asked for a payment agreement and they had broken it. And it does break your heart to know that you kept somebody's water off with 8 kids because we can, and because you ignored us for that many months because we couldn't shut somebody off. And so all we can do is promise you that people are gonna be treated the same, whether it's your water bill. The other thing, just so that all of you are landlords here, I think very few of you get notified when your landlord or when your tenants are delinquent on your water bill. That's coming to an end now.
Mhm.
You will get a notification. I think Sherry's one of the few people that actually gets those notices, and a lot of landlords come in. The other thing is that we don't even know half the properties that have landlords. People just come in and say, I'm putting the utilities in my name. And so we're gonna try to be a lot stricter about that so that we have good information. Because I think we have a lot of landlords that we don't even know about.
Mhm.
And we just haven't been strict about it in the past. And so we're gonna unclick the box that said the landlord doesn't want to be notified. And if you have to throw it in the garbage, that's on you. But I just don't think we've done as good of a job as we could in making sure that we communicate with you. Because at the end of the day, it is your responsibility to make sure that gets paid. You're the people who choose those tenants, whether they're good paying tenants or not. And so we want to do better about that with all of you. And all we can do is promise you that whoever got a letter this year is on the first year.
If I read it right, I think the Atlantic Property Maintenance Inspection Program is triggered by anyone complaining about a property, whether it's a rental property or not. Which seems like a much fairer way to me to clean up the town. If you can only inspect a rental and not an owner occupied.
The hard thing that I would say about that is just like when your neighbor calls to complain about you, I don't tell you who complained. Because the worst things as a city administrator to deal with are neighbor complaints. Because it's when someone moves or someone dies, and until then, it doesn't go away. So to say that a tenant has to call about their landlord, and that you know the only reason,
Tenant call about a landlord.
but you just said complaint based.
If any complaint triggers an inspection, point being owner occupied also. Which is not just picking on a renter. I think a renter should have the same constitutional rights as an owner occupied.
Yeah,
There'd be a difference. And this program, there is.
right. I mean, I don't know what the legal, I've never lived in or worked in a place where we inspected every house. I don't know I don't know about that. I don't think anybody has that program, but,
I don't think you could have that program.
right, that's my point. So, but that's again, the right, it's different because it's just like when you take building codes. If you wanna wire your own house, you can. Because if you wanna live in a house that's not electrically safe and you choose to live in that environment, you get to choose that. But as soon as you choose for someone else to live there, that's when the code changes with regard to electric. So that's a similar example where we sort of take your right away to do your own work in a house that you don't live in. And I think it's
The
safe.
point you're missing there is when you do your own wiring, it has to be inspected, which means it is safe.
Yes.
You didn't just do it however you want. It has to be inspected by the state. So appreciate you guys having the meeting. I think it's a good thing. Just don't know that we're on the right track because I think a lot of the issues now are more owner occupied and not rentals.
I think what we can tell you is that for all of you is that we're going to try and do a better job, just like I said about enforcing other things. I don't know that we disagree that we've been lax when it comes to nuisance. Taylor, our nuisance officer, is here tonight. We're trying to do as good as we can. Some things we can see, some things we can't. I don't have any problem if you have owner occupied properties near you you're more than welcome to let us know about those things. There's, the garbage is obviously a hot topic that we're talking about.
Right.
And
Thank you.
in regard to our comp plan, which has been like the last 2 years, the two of the top 4 goals, one was the visual appearance of our community and making sure that our housing stock is as best as it can be. And so all of this, whether it's the rental inspections, the garbage, nuisance enforcement, all goes along with that. And so this is not just to pick on all of you. I don't disagree that there's, but we had somebody in court. It took us months and months and months to get the day that we could go clean their stuff up. And $3,600 later of your tax money and ours, we have that property cleaned up. And if you drive past it today, it's been since Thanksgiving weekend, that person's yard is all filled right back up again. So it is not simple to enforce that, but we're trying to do the best that we can to make sure that we do what we can to alleviate some of those properties as we find them and can deal with them.
And I will say that sending out your water bills that delinquent any of your client, that is helpful because my contract states you don't pay utilities, you get evicted. And I never had an issue after a phone call.
It seems like though in the system, according to Donna and Susie at the office, for those that we know, according to them at least, you can click the button to notify the landlord or not notify, and almost all of them have them not notified. So I basically have said, we're just gonna unclick all those. It's more postage for us, but at least you know. Cause I don't, again, and nobody's gonna get a $2,700 bill ever again. And you will be shut off. And for some of you I know some of you have gotten, we have people that because of shared services, we can't shut people off. Those shared services have to go away because you can't shut people off, and that's how people get $2,700 bills. Thankfully, that is an owner occupied. And we didn't put it on the tax roll in the past, so that's another tool in the toolbox that we weren't using, but May 1st, if they don't have their water turned on before then, it'll be on their tax bill, so. And as I said to them, it's hard, but we don't give out free water here in the city of Red Oak anymore, at least. So we are trying to be better about all things, not just this group, and we do appreciate everything that you guys have done to try and fix up the properties, and we are gonna be more aggressive about the people who have not been paying attention to these rules, so. Hopefully, those of you that have good properties and have done it, it's an easy process, they'll walk through and it'll be good. And I think maybe long-term, there are certainly cities that have sort of incentive-based, not complaint-based, but the better that you do, the longer it is until we come back. And I think that, again, being open to, that's what I'm saying, kind of what we look at as we go forward, that maybe looking at something like that makes sense, but we just need to get first on track that we've gotten through all of them and then be able to sort of tweak coming back to the council and saying, all right, if somebody had no issues, then maybe they get a 5-year pass instead of a 3-year pass.
I think most of mine have been inspected at least twice, some maybe even 3. I don't know how many times you need to inspect them, but it seems like, what's the real issue? You want the money or you want the safety? I mean, how many times you need to inspect them?
Well, that's again, like, I think we have to get, right now, we probably need to get through a 3-year cycle and then reevaluate and say, all right, is there a way that we can then say, you know, if you had very few violations, that you get a longer
We're 10
occupancy?
years into a cycle, 2015 till now, and been inspected. I
Been
think 3
inspected
times.
3 times, because I've got all my certificates right here.
So, I don't see the need for,
The problem is that we didn't base it, like, you can't go back and change. If in 2015, we had said, based on the number of violations that you have, it's longer. Once we have a system like that, if that's what the council would choose to change it to, then I think
remember
that makes
coming to
sense.
the meetings the first time, and I remember Bill Belling saying, well, why can't we just do this once? Just get stuff cleaned up once.
I think
That
because,
stuff gets forgotten.
Well, and I think the
I don't know
challenge
how many
also,
times you need to inspect the same house. Mine still have the same people in them. I don't know how many times you need to inspect it.
well, if you look at how often though things change when it comes to like our billing system, you may be that consistent person, but a lot of times that's not the case. And so you again have to think about the practical side. We would have to think about the administrative side of what qualifies you to not come back in. Is it because it's the same people with the same tenants? And so we'd have to be able to define in an equitable way how it is that you would get a longer time frame. Not saying that that's not something we can strive for, because it certainly is. Because again, I don't think it's anybody's like, we don't need to have more paperwork and have more
But
time.
you're kind of missing my point. Some of them been inspected 3 times, and the neighbor across the street is owner occupied, horrible condition. Nothing happens to that one.
I get your point, and that's why I said that we are gonna try to do our best to enforce nuisance, which is different, and I don't think that we have the right to just go in and randomly inspect people's houses. I think we do.
Oh, you just said what I think. I don't think you have the right to inspect a rental just because you want to call it a
Yeah,
rental.
well, Shirley said the Supreme Court in our state here that we're governed by is. And if somebody thinks that, I mean, everybody has a right to take us to the Supreme Court if that's what you thought. If you believe that, someone could certainly challenge it and take it all the way up to the US Supreme Court. I would say that, that's the only way that things like that get hashed out. But for now, we have our legal counsel. And again, there was some flux in there while there was, appellate court's decision within the state that had said it was illegal. But again, when you look at why it's illegal, you sort of have to look at things like that. You have to read the, you know, the fine print of the case, that it wasn't a program being administered like ours, where we're giving you ample notice, or what they're doing when they get in there, or what kind of a notice is being given. And so that's where, again, I would just make sure that you do your due diligence as much as you can to give your tenants as much notice as you can. Because some people care if it's messy, as you know, from being landlords. I was a landlord for one house that I couldn't sell very quickly, and that was a very unpleasant experience. So I give you all a lot of credit for, it's not fun. So we will continue to do our best to try and improve it. Again, I think this is what we have to do for this year and probably the next couple, but as we learn, it's not what we're looking for to just make your lives miserable. If there's a way that we can do better as we go through this process and at least keep it the way it is for now, then at least as long as I'm here, I'm committed to bringing to the council anything that seems to make more sense and is logical. But for now, this is the program.
And John, I hear what you're saying, and I understand your frustration. I see it a little differently. Because you're in the business, you make money with your rentals. And, this is my home. And so I'm not making any money here. I'm just subsiding here. You're making a profit on this and these people are kind of at your mercy to what what you provide to them for that money that they pay you for that service. We given Taylor as much teeth as we can. We're trying to improve those homes that you're talking about. And I know exactly the homes you're talking about and where they are. I drive by them every day too. But once again, that's a little bit harder of an egg to crack. So for a couple of different reasons. But anyway.
Hi, I'm Lottie Rainey. I live at 501 Ohio Avenue. And I have a few properties that I own myself, and I have rental properties that we manage professionally. Phil, when your first statement, when you introduced yourself, you asked if those inspections you do are reasonable, and I would definitely support that they're very reasonable. I've worked with you and every one of the inspectors. I've been in the original meetings all the way back. And some of the same things in those original meetings, I know many of you weren't here, are being talked about even today. Some of the people that I look at that were in those original meetings. I would like to say that I have supported this program from the very beginning, from my own properties to the properties we manage. And just like you said, are your inspections reasonable? I would like to ask you, have I been to every meeting on time? And have I complied with everything that's been put forth on every inspection that you've ever encountered with me?
You've been very easy to work with.
I appreciate that. I just wanted to validate, I'm not a spokesman. I'm not political. A lot of times you hardly ever see me speak. But when I do, I would like the respect to know that, if I'm gonna speak, it's about something I know about. And this is my livelihood and something we do every day. And so we do take it very seriously. And that's why I've never been late to a meeting, never will be. But some of the same things in the original meetings are coming out now. You've got some angry owners, landlords that are taking care of their properties that have supported the program. And it has not been administered well. And we gotta move forward together. I'm just saying like it was. I'm not against anybody. And it goes way beyond compliance, people. All the way back, Phil, before you, I had properties that were inspected, passed the inspection, complied with everything that was done and done it quickly. We don't mess around. If it's gonna be fixed, we call in a certified plumber, certified whoever, and it gets done. And we send that information off. I couldn't, for a while, my administration couldn't get certificates. We'd call and try to find out where they're at. Found out that, it wasn't with the inspector, it was actually with the city. And again, I'm not throwing mud, I'm just, if we're gonna clear the record, let's move forward together. Because we move forward together and you don't have compliance, I'm telling you what, the people that are taking care of the properties are probably gonna band together, get their own inspector and do the process themselves. And it's not a threat, I'm just saying, that's why you're getting so much animosity now. It's people are frustrated because they've taken care of their properties, complied, and you hit it on the head. That's why I stepped up when I did, because I'm agreeing with John and exactly what you said to get ahead of it. You need to incentivize those people that are taking care of those properties. And your inspectors can give you a good idea of who does and does not take care of their properties, okay? So I wouldn't wait for this first 3-year program to get that done. I would get something out so that it earns the respect of the people that are taking care of their property so that they understand and we come to common ground rather than say, oh, we're going to do it. We're going to look at it. Don't look at it. Let's do that now. Let's get everybody on board so that we're in one room together, not against each other. Because the purpose was in the original was homeowners and land and landlords. But again, I understand the hurdles of that, and I've read from, other states, all those things, and there's no use arguing about it. We're gonna do it. Everybody needs to comply. And it needs to be, I love John's idea about, it needs to be evident to us, okay? You start getting the scuttlebutt behind the scenes as far as you're asking, and Phil, I know you've been asked by everybody, well, why isn't, that landowner that's not taking care of his property, that landlord, why, stop all that. So be transparent, incentivize those landlords that are taking care of their property. And I think then you'll earn the respect and be able to move forward in a positive manner.
So I guess, what I'm hearing people say is, that they'd like to see maybe an extension on their inspections if they've done good in the past, and they don't have to have it done every 3 years, and they'd also like to see more landlords participating in the program. I mean, that's probably one of the biggest things that I see is that lack of participation by
The
some.
biggest thing is gonna be compliance. If you don't get compliance, this program is not gonna work.
So-
I've never said that.
So I
Every
would,
meeting you've ever heard me stand up and talk,
I would
but if you don't
personally,
get compliance, it's done.
I would welcome any suggestions on how to make that happen. I mean, and I think everybody at this table would welcome any kind of suggestion.
That's got to stay in your arena,
No,
not.
I understand, but so we have
I would
to,
like to know.
we have to put the teeth to it, but I mean, I'm open for suggestions.
Yeah,
So
I'm with Mr. Bills. I'd like to hear some ideas because I wouldn't know what
But
would
if
be
you
a
don't
good
get
incentive.
compliance, the program's not gonna work.
Well, it's all about enforcement.
It
All
is.
comes down to the city staff.
Yes,
And I can tell you that most of us that are there have been there less than a year.
that's
But
correct.
if
So we weren't doing it
But if
then.
you're gonna start it, you've got to have some bite of the compliance. You can't sit here and say, give me suggestions. That's not gonna.
I'm not
work.
sure how we know what's rental property and what's not
It's
rental
in-
property. I know we know we can go on Beacon to see who owns it, but I don't know if we can go on Beacon and
Then
see
you're
who
not
lives.
ready for the program.
We
Oh,
are,
We have
We're ready.
$500 a day in a municipal infraction if you don't register.
that's correct.
I understand that, but you're telling me you don't know how to make that happen if somebody doesn't comply.
Yes, we do.
Yes, we do.
That's the council. So I'll speak.
That's-
Yes,
She
we
can
do.
speak
Not
on
gonna
that.
argue.
We
Just
have
saying.
100 and, over 200 letters that went out.
Good.
Okay, so like I said, there's some of the people that have a ton of properties and they can't get them all done in the month of January. So we're gonna try to work with people that have a significant number. And if that's technically tweaking this, I think that's about being reasonable.
And I don't know how we got off track this because again,
We're just saying, yeah.
I am for it, but if you don't give 100% compliance, it is not gonna work.
Right, so it all falls on the staff, like the council gives us direction. So as soon as January 1 comes, if we're like, oh, that was nice that 3 people turned in their application, and then we just go along our merry way, well, that's how you don't get compliance. Just like, we just let the $2,700 water bill people just come in and laugh in our, but
You
so
said February 1, not January.
at the end of January, right? So when we get to the beginning of February, we will have to decide
Right.
what's gonna go out, making phone calls. We have to get better records. And so we have over 200 properties, which is about 80 landlords right now that we have that we can deal with. And Bree as our attorney, has looked at this. And so come February 1, if someone's ignored us, they're gonna start getting letters.
Okay, all right. That, and I don't know how we got out there, but I'm just saying, that's the part, if it doesn't work, I'm gonna be tarred and feathered by my clients, and I'm gonna come to you. Because it's been going on for quite some time, and again, I'm not against anybody, I wanna make it transparent as possible, so we know where we're headed. But I seriously would challenge you guys to make your incentives now and get them announced for those people that are landlords that are taking care of their property. Then you're gonna build some trust. Don't say, well, we'll look at it after the first 3 years.
Well, but the reality is that it's hard. I don't think the records from the past are, I mean, there are obviously records for those of you that went through it. But there's a pretty big gap there. And so even if you still had to comply for the next couple of years, if we're saying to Phil now, keep good records of those things, the council could choose that someone in 25 who fell under X, Y, and Z circumstances can be extended to 29 instead of 27.
And
Yes.
I'm challenging you
Yes.
to go through that now.
Right.
Not to say, we can't do. I'm
Right.
challenging you to.
I don't disagree. I'm saying though that just because of something that happened in 2015, if we would like go back and look, that's not gonna make
I
sense
don't
to
think
you.
it has to go back, just everything moving forward.
Yeah.
And your inspectors know the previous history. They know it.
Yeah.
Phil's been in a lot of those homes. If he hasn't, then those are the ones that need to be inspected. So put something together in the future, not the past.
What's that sound like to you, Phil? I mean, does that sound manageable or not?
Yes.
So-
And I don't like to point fingers either, but it's been, 5 years I've been doing this. And for the first time, I think everybody's on the same page as far as this council and the city administration about getting Bree involved. That's
Yeah.
the main thing. We have got to make some of these people accountable. And that's the first step, and they're all in agreement. For whatever reason before, reasons unbeknownst, nobody knew that those inspections were done in 2022 because 2020 and 2021 were skipped right over.
Right, right.
And I can only do the inspections that were sent from the city.
And I don't think we don't look at the history. I just think moving forward, you want to be transparent and you want to build some trust with everybody because I'm gonna get my clients that are gonna boot me out. And I keep supporting the program. Well, I go back another time and we don't have compliance. I can't keep doing it. And that's what I'm asking.
I agree. We have to start with consistency. Consistency across. Nobody gets treated any better than the rest. If someone's left behind, they're gonna get fined. And that's where we start.
And
And
I think it
then we
needs to be
can,
transparent, like John had talked about. I think that's an excellent.
We've talked about the possibility, and we talked a little bit about this with SWIPCO,
Mhm.
about having, once the inspections are completed, having a way for those to show up on Beacon that with building inspections as well. So that building inspections, rental inspections with current occupancy are available per property.
If it's Beacon, we'd have to wait for the county, so we can certainly put something out there, like even just. Here's the current list of who's up for occupancy, and then we already have a spreadsheet that's gonna say when you turned in your application, when you're scheduled for an inspection. And then, one of the reasons we hopefully have everybody's email now is we're not gonna make you come back in unless you owe another fee. The goal is just to email you the certificate to try and make it less cumbersome that people have to come back in. Try to do the same thing with, building permits going forward. We're looking at new software. People can pay things online so that you wouldn't even have to come in. We're trying to get in the new century with how we make things available.
The past has been very paper heavy and there's occupancy certificates in a pile that people just never came in and got, or building permits that people never came and got, and how they even were able to.
But it's again, because of the
Doing
system
things.
that we have, like
Yeah.
that's where we're hoping that as long as you have minor re-inspections, that we're not asking you to pay something in addition, because that's what holds up things up. You might even be done. And then somebody doesn't get it because they owed another $50. Just like we have you come in for a building permit and we don't tell you how much the fee is because of it's complicated and someone else has to calculate it. Instead of just having a check sheet and you know what you have to pay and you never have to come back again, we just send you your permit. We're trying to make it more efficient as we go.
Do you have anything to add to that
No, I
statement?
was gonna, Sean is right. Beacon is an unimaginable tool that we aren't using. And there's a program that SWIPCO is working on now. If we can get a certain grade as an agency, all the towns that we work for, we do the inspections for, we can use Beacon to our advantage. And so you can go to Beacon and apply for a building permit. You can apply for the rental permit. And then once you've got that CO, then you'll have a little tag on your property, like John said. Then you can look at Beacon and say, is this a rental? You'll have an indicator on there. Yes, it was inspected and it's got a star, so it's got its CO. Beacon is just unreal what it can do. Down the road, we're working on that right now. We're working with Homeland Security and getting a grade for our agency, and then that grade will follow all the towns that we work for. It's very hard to explain, and we're working on it, but Beacon will be there in the future, and it'll make things so much easier.
How
you
far
know.
down?
And it'll improve
How far?
all property
A
values.
year maybe.
Which
I
is
mean, it's gonna be a
advantageous.
while.
Is that gonna cost us?
No, and that's the beauty. If SWIPCO gets the grade that we're hoping for, then that way the cities don't have to pay for that. Because if you were to go and get that, capabilities from Beacon, it would cost you a lot more.
Because I know
County
they
would
do
pay.
have some add-on stuff you can pay for.
Yeah, if we get it as SWIPCO, then we can provide that for the communities we serve.
My passion about it, I don't want it to come off negative. I'm for it. I always have been. I just want it to work fairly and consistently. And even when, all the way back, when it wasn't working well, we did our job, which we had to do more work. And I'm not saying we submitted all the information and more. And anything that we touched professionally as a management company, we gave you the information. Even beyond what you asked for, and we will continue that. But we've got to have compliance and you've got to incentivize people that are taking good care of their property. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
So,
Anybody else have anything?
I got a question for them. Phil, do you do any incentives in those other towns that you're,
No, they're basically just getting off the ground. Red Oak is by far the town with the longest records of this. They're the ones that first started it. And to be truthful, I think these other towns can see the good that it's doing. And so then they're like, I see what it's doing in Red Oak. We want to do it too. And that's going with all these towns that have been brought up. Villisca, Sydney, Malvern. There's several on the fence that are considering it. Some want the building permits, some want the rental inspections, but a lot of them want the rental inspections. They want their rentals cleaned up because they know that that's a problem that they can handle. And with the building permits, the same thing. If someone's doing something, it needs to be looked at and make sure it's done right.
So is this the first time you've heard about or considered incentivizing the good players?
No, it's a logistical nightmare, but there's towns, bigger towns, Johnston, around Des Moines, other areas that you get at, if there's 3 things on the list that have corrections, then you get a 3-year certificate. If there's 10 or 12, then guess what? We're coming back in 2 years. If there's nothing on the list and you pass, then you're good for 5 years. Then you're gonna start wavering. Some years you're gonna have 1,000 and some years you're gonna have 300. I mean, it's very hard to keep track of that many and the ebbs and flows with all the, I'm on a 5-year, I'm on a 3-year, I'm on a 2-year. But the problematic ones need to be looked at sooner and the good ones get longer.
I guess that was my original question was if that is a manageable scenario where you have people that are incentivized and people that are not. So how do you manage that? I mean, is that a spreadsheet you run? How do you do that?
It would just be the expiration date on the CO.
But how do you sat there and said you don't know where the rental houses are. If you don't go from.
Yeah, that was my mistake. I'm told that we do. I didn't know
I was
that.
gonna say,
Yeah, my bad.
Otherwise, if
Dwayne,
you don't order the town up
No,
and say, okay, that was last.
that was
year.
my mistake. I did not think we knew everybody that was a rental.
There's a possibility that we don't know.
Well,
But we
that's
have
what
to
I'm
do
saying.
the best that we
Well, how
can.
do you get past the point, if you don't quarter the town up by sections for years, how do you get past the point that this guy has rental houses in section 1 and he didn't tell you, and you just picked out houses around town and give them permits?
So we have past records, we have utility billing, are our main 2
But
sources.
changes all the time.
Right, so we have the best records that we can, and
Like,
we're
I
gonna
just
try to
wondered
do
if
better.
that wouldn't give you a better tool if you didn't work like to Oak, and then everything there should have already had, if you're a renter, they come in and they don't have it, that's when you start your fees for not turning your house in. I mean, and then from Oak to Washington or whatever it may be. That way you've actually pinpointed and went past, okay, everybody, if you're north, it's an honor system, you need to come in and tell us if you have it. Otherwise, you're jumping all over town, and then it may be over here, and you're gonna miss it.
Well, right now, we're choosing to take the list that we have and actually sending you something, not just hoping that you know you
Right,
need
but
to.
we're the ones that can comply and will comply.
Right.
But I'm looking at the bad actors that you're actually trying to step up.
We're gonna do the
Unless
best that we
you-
can.
If you don't quarter out and say, okay, yours was last year and this year and this year, you have no way of pinpointing anybody.
So you
Just a
think that if you just say a quadrant and then somehow we advertise that if you're own property that you
Yeah,
have to come
from,
forward?
Oak Street north, this is year one. Then the other one, I think Washington Oak, that was year two. And then from, Washington to the south boundary, that was year three. And that gives, I think Shirley was in on that too. That gives you an area that every one of these will be, and you're not slipping through the cracks and saying, well, they'll catch you 2-3 years down the road.
Understood. We'll have to look at that. Right now, we have the list and we've invited people to say, this is your year. Based on the fact that we,
Invitation
right.
hasn't worked for me. I know the people that cause problems and they're not here.
Well, the reality is like, we're not gonna tell anybody, but if you all wanted to see the list, you're welcome to call us and say, I know this is a rental and this is who it's owned by, and we'll be happy to check the list. And if they're not on there, some of it is, again, I think for all the places I've worked, we probably have the weakest landlord database within our utility billing.
That's what I'm saying, unless there's, flags put in place, it's easily missed.
There's people that own properties in town that are not from here, obviously. And that, we've caught on to that just through HUD inspections or SIRHA inspections. Their records were different than ours at one point, so we've connected some dots there too.
So Scott Brown is on the Zoom and I need to
Oh, yes, you want to speak in?
see how I can unmute him.
Can you hear me?
There we go.
Am I live?
You're
Yep,
live,
we can hear
Scotty.
you.
Okay. I'm curious on the inspection list, or you're going by the 2018 state. Is that the same inspection as like SIRHA? Is that their checklist as SWIFTCO's doing?
I can't speak of it because I don't do inspections for SIRHA. I only
Oh.
have my own checklist.
Okay,
That's
then.
Every
All right,
meeting I do,
then.
everybody asks, what's a SIRHA? I have no idea what's on a SIRHA inspection. I don't do them. I do SWIFTCO.
Okay,
Well,
thank you. So
looking at
with this checklist, it could be amended for our town to be specific on what you guys are wanting. What is the goal at the end of the day of these inspections to after the process is done, say 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, what is the accomplishment of this? What's the end game? Just
I don't know that-
facelift and safety?
I think
I don't know that
help-
we can pick and choose in it. It's where we adopted the 2018 rental code, and I think that we have to stick by that 2018 building rental code. Is that correct or
You can
not?
amend it. You
Well,
can
you don't-
absolutely amend it.
And you excluded a few things. Didn't they?
I don't know.
Well, we're going by of course it can be amended because that other towns are doing different. I mean, otherwise it'd just be a follow suit. This is what this town does. I mean, it'd be across the board. There wouldn't be any discussions like this today.
Well, I didn't know the discussion was based on what part of the code we were gonna adhere to and what part of the code we were not gonna
Yeah.
adhere to.
Yeah, I mean,
Well, what I'm saying is I want to know what the end of the day goal is, and then let's make this checklist specifically to make that happen.
I
think the end of-
understand what you're saying, Scotty. I think health, safety and visible appearance are key,
Compliance is
and
compliance,
compliance. Yeah,
Compliance of,
100% compliance.
so that we know rental properties. Yes.
oh, okay, sure. So that's, I, from listening to today and previous conversations with a few of you folks, I don't think we're ready to implement any of this. There's a lot of open things that have not been a set decision, I guess, in what I can hear and see, to implement. It sounds like we're just going off a whim on see how it goes, but I think we need to have this all in black and white for
I think
everyone.
That's what we're trying to do, Scotty, and I think, I
Yes.
don't know that we got you a copy of what SWPCO's
Well, I'm
inspection
out of
is.
town, and that's why obviously I'd love to be there.
Peggy can pick one up for you.
Yes.
So
Um,
like for instance, there's items under fire safety,
mhm.
interior building safety, plumbing safety, electric safety, yeah, exterior building safety and sanitation. I
Right.
guess it's as, how do you want to explain it, Bill? Is this is
I mean, it's that,
exclusive?
it's not that we're being wishy-washy, it's
an
just,
exclusive list.
all we're trying to say is that as we go forward, we are listening to what people have talked about. A big thing is enforcement, making sure we're consistent, that will happen going forward. I think there was a good idea about transparency and how we make sure that those who are complying, or if a potential renter wanted to see things, that we can try and do our best to get that information out, not just if you call and ask.
Mhm.
Um,
Well, I greatly appreciate the open ear. That's great. And they'll allow us to suggest things. I do appreciate that.
And I think also like looking at the incentive stuff, we have to, obviously, that would have to get changed in the code. And so we have to make sure that if we were to look at something like that, that we also have legal counsel just explaining, you know, it can't just be because we think you're doing a great job. There's gotta be a definition in the code of how you would get longer.
Without being there and not seeing this, this pamphlet of the inspection, is it a checklist where a guy like myself that has 20 or whoever knows how many rentals, but they can go through, because I do not plan on paying another fee of $50 for anybody coming back. You're going to come see my place and it's going to be done and over with. 3 years, if not longer.
And we appreciate that. That's the way we want it to work, Scotty.
Yeah.
So whatever we can do to provide the information so you know what to expect is the key, I think.
It's not
Okay.
all inclusive, but it's 3 pages of checked items.
Okay.
But not all inclusive.
But
Right,
it
it
is,
says right on the top, it's not all inclusive.
And what's that mean?
There could be something that he sees that isn't compliant that's on here.
Oh,
It's not.
well, then it needs to be in black and white.
Right.
It needs to be written down. It needs to be in black and white. It doesn't, it's not a choice to be picked on whether it has to be in black and white.
We'll be reviewing all the things that Phil puts in there.
Mm-hmm.
I think that our experience has been that Phil's been reasonable. I think that's kind of, Audie attested to that, the other people that have spoken.
Yes, I agree with Audie on everything. I agree with most everything that's been spoken today. It's been very knowledgeable. Black and white's the only way to go today. If it's not in black and white, you have nothing.
It's important, it'll be on the list.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then if it's not on the list, it doesn't matter. Correct?
Well, I
Yeah, I
think
mean,
what we just said is that there can be things that come up that are not on the list. It's no different than if you build, well, all I can say is if there's things that happens, we'll have to have Phil come back and say, here's the 10 things that weren't on the list that I started putting on people's, and then we'll have to look at it. I don't think that's what's gonna happen. I think there's an umbrella protection saying that, but our experience from what people are saying is that it hasn't been some ridiculously extreme circumstances. And if that's the case, then we'll start evaluating, and, you know, I can have updates from Phil as to the kinds of things that are coming up. But to say we're gonna somehow have a list that come heck or high water, like if it's not on the list, it doesn't matter. Like, I don't know, there can't be much that comes up that's not on
They're
this list.
just general points, and you have a lot of things under these general items that we don't know what is happening, and that's why we have Phil taking
Right.
care of them.
well, and we've got the or the property maintenance book that's put out by the International Building Codes or whomever that is.
Code council.
We are not
Yeah,
allowed to
International
copy
Codes
that book
Council,
for
yes.
people. I've been asked about that. That's copyright laws, but
But we have a copy at
I
City
know
Hall.
Sherry had asked for, I emailed the link and
Yeah.
that we're allowed to send out.
That hits on it.
And I thought that's why we adopted that by resolution, was because we wanted that to apply.
Well, we adopted by resolution, but it's also adopted by ordinance.
Is there gonna be another meeting with us landlords, before this is, this Jan, I mean, you guys picked this date, but, I don't think we're ready. I think needs to be another follow-up meeting, to go over what has been discussed today.
I don't think that's our interpretation, Scott. We're ready. You either got a letter or you didn't. Did you get a letter? I don't have a list in front of me.
Yes, I got multiple letters.
Okay, so yeah, then we're going. It's a go.
For those
So,
properties that you got letters for, yeah.
Okay, well.
we'll work
and,
through it. People need to come in and get their applications in, and if after your inspection you have a problem, you're certainly welcome to call us at City Hall and
mhm.
we'll report back, but it's a go. Do you have anything else? Otherwise, we have someone else, Sherry's up at the podium.
Okay, no, thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
If you
Thanks,
can
Scott.
mute yourself when you're done, that'd be appreciated.
Uh-huh.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Scott.
Bye.
Sure.
I'm Sherry Borland. I own B&B Rentals. I've been in business in Red Oak for almost 40 years. I have almost 50 properties. So just so everybody knows, this is my hometown. I'm not originally from here, but I chose Red Oak to be my hometown. Start my business. My kids were raised in the area. Red Oak means everything to me because I live here. So my rental properties, I spend my life in them. I've spent the last 40 years of my life doing my properties. Ask anybody where the Borlands are at, they're in an empty house working somewhere. So that's all we do is work. We spend a ton of money in this town and on our properties. That being said, I got 40 letters all at once. That was impossible to take care of. Okay, not possible. Lisa has, I've talked with her. She has decided to work with me, which I really appreciate because there was no way I could do all those at once. And I've already started my inspections. The only thing I want the council to know is that nothing has been brought up about the tenants, really about the tenants. And the only ones that really truly know about the tenants are us landlords. We deal with them every day. So the good ones and the bad ones. There's good landlords and bad landlords. There's good tenants and bad tenants. It's been my experience, and from all these years, even back in 2015, my tenants don't like these inspections. They don't want them. They don't want the inspectors or anybody, including me, in their homes unless there's something that need me to come repair. They don't like it. Lisa's probably the only exception.
She said I was an exception.
He's an exception. Most of them don't want it. I just want you to be aware of that. They don't like it. They see it as an invasion of their privacy. We own the structures, but it's their homes. Okay, no more than most of us wouldn't like somebody coming into our homes. I wouldn't want somebody coming into my home. Okay, when they did the inspections for the taxes, I didn't like it. That's my home. They see it the same way. I just want you to be aware of that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
How come Phil don't get a name tag? He's up there by himself.
It's the only time he comes, and these things are not cheap. Next time we'll get you one with paper.
But they're way better than the yellow cardboard stock we used to have, I just have to say.
Will Red Oak eventually get their inspector?
I don't know that we can justify the expense.
Right now.
I mean, because you'd have to, you'd have to have a building inspection, certification along with this rental stuff, and looking at the building permits that we issue, I don't know that we could justify paying someone on our own that would be certified and everything.
The big thing with the checklist stuff is if Phil's not there tomorrow, he gets hit by the bus. The next guy coming in has a whole new point of view.
Sure. Get what you're saying.
The prior one to Phil, he had a whole different point of view than say Phil will, or the next guy after that. That's the big thing about HM. This is what we're doing. This is what we have been doing consistently. I guess my major ask would be black and white from the council is, this is what we want to look at. And the main thing, for sure, you know, if there's something that stands out with it. I mean, I know for facts, when the city's reading water meters back in the day and stuff, the circumstances in some of these houses were so atrocious, and they was never brought up. Because that's just because.
Because it's super unpopular to enforce laws. You can check my career choices. They're not fun. I see a lot on the internet about me and my past, and it's because of this. It's because you enforce the codes, and these guys can tell you, when I got interviewed, I said, nobody interviews a city administrator and says, we really don't want you to do your job, until they don't. Until people get mad. And that's really what happens. And all I can say is that I put my head down at night knowing that I'm gonna enforce the rules the same. I care about all of you equally. I say it when I say I don't care, meaning it doesn't matter who you are. No codes say anything about who you are. And it's unpopular. And I feel that vibe already. You know, like just the same thing, like I told you, we're being stricter in a solid 3 months about utility billing. And people look at you like, what the heck? Like, why are we talking about this? Why is this an issue now?
And that's why black and white, like Scotty was talking about on the Zoom, is so important. That it's not about you, it's not about Phil, it's about, this is what we're gonna do.
Well, we say in there, it's very clear, it's this 2018 property maintenance code. But again, it's no different than when you build a house. There's a whole entire book of things that you have to do, and there
And
still
you're
has to
talking
be.
about a town with 1900 house, you know, they were built in the 1900s. You're putting in a 2018 code. You know, which Des Moines and all of them do for houses that was built, you know, back in the 1900s, some of them, they're still knob and tube wiring, you know, all that type of stuff out there. Let's change it out.
Well, there shouldn't be in a rental, there should not be knob and tube wiring in a rental unit.
Yep.
That's for
So
sure.
I'm saying it's out there. So your neighbors got it and burns down the house.
Well, again, communication lines are open. If anybody has, like, we're gonna ask you to go through this, kind of like we just said, when Scott said, we are going. This is a go. And if you have experiences that you feel like are noteworthy to come and talk to me about, you're welcome to give me a call, or I prefer, it seems like I'm always in meetings when people stop. So ideal is you get a hold of me so I know you're coming. And Phil, keep me informed. Taylor will be kind of overseeing it on our side, keeping track of who comes in. He's the one sending everything to SWIPCO. So let's do the best we can together, and we're committed to letting you know that we're going to do our best to do what the council is asking us to do as staff, and listen to all of you and your concerns, and try to blend those worlds and do the best that we can for our community.
The 2018 building and inspection codes, those are not SWIPCO's creation, correct? They are over and above that SWIPCO is subscribing to.
International Building
The
Code.
city is subscribing to it. The city approved and put it in our
I've been reading
ordinances.
through that code, and just the reason why a checklist will be difficult, just for clarity on everybody's end, is because the 2018 code gives the inspector the right to interpret the code based on the circumstances that they find themselves in. They do not have the ability to override said code, but they have the ability to interpret the code for the unique situation in which they inspect, based on the structure, based on the individual circumstances of the building. And so having a black and white checklist that will be something unique and something specific and uniform across the board for every single property might prove difficult when the code itself allows for an inspector to distinguish between individual properties based on what he sees. So it is not exactly SWIPCO's even call in this matter to have a checklist. It would be the International Building Code itself, which is what is allowing this, which is why a checklist probably would not happen, because it's allowed for in the 2018 code itself.
In my experience, again, I've been a city administrator for 30 years. My experience with building inspectors, while maybe the gray areas seem like they would be disadvantageous to people like yourselves, I have not found that building inspectors are tyrants like we expect them to be. And a lot of times that leeway, you know, a lot of times they may not live here specifically, but they're part of our community. They're here, they work for us. And if they make everything difficult, then they're not going to be working for the city of Red Oak. And so We see them as a partner, both with us and with you. And so my experience with what seems wishy-washy has been, I can think of an example where someone that literally interpreted the code, this was on a new building that they were remodeling an old hotel. And that the people were afraid that they'd never be able to afford a sprinkler system. And in one very literal interpretation of this old building, it seemed like they were gonna have to put in a sprinkler. And the inspector went through because it was outrageous, like they were never to be able to do that. And they found a way to say, if I look at things like this seems unreasonable for this property in a little town in Iowa of 2,500 people where I just came from. And their experiences, I have not seen them just be ridiculous with that leeway. I think the leeway oftentimes is advantageous for us in small towns when we're trying to work with people.
That has been my experience as well.
Good. So again, hopefully going
It's always
forward.
been fair.
Right. And those of you that have gone through it, I have not heard bad things about SWPCO or Phil. I think you're right. All of us in government need to strive to be consistent. If I'm the city administrator or the next person or who I followed, it shouldn't feel like I hear this, like there's a new sheriff in town. The same rules were the rules before I came, but it's how we interpret them, it's how we enforce them, and it's about being consistent. And so I think we're trying to instill in all the staff for the city is being transparent, being consistent, working hard for all of you, and being good stewards of the council who is elected to make the decisions and we're employed to make sure they get acted out, so.
All the inspectors have been more than fair, in my opinion, on all the way back. And I think it was, the only had one bad experience in Philip. Can't remember if it was you, but, make sure your tour guide can hear well. As I age, I can't hear well, and I was the tour guide on one of the inspections, and it was, husband, wife. And again, we were being very respectful. The bathroom door was closed, and Phil asked, if he could go inside, and I thought the gentleman said, go, but he said no. So make sure.
Speak loudly,
Oops.
lock the door. when the
Well,
inspector-
and I would also like to add that I think, there's been a couple situations where people have contacted me, whether it be tenants or landlords, with frustrations in not being able to evict particular client, residents. And so I think if there's ways that we can enforce codes that can then help support your businesses in that way, that's another direction that we also need to look at. So, I've had a number of calls with rodents and insects and things like that, and we can't go in and inspect those. So that's a challenge. The only thing we can do is call the health department. So there's definitely areas for improvement and a way, however we can work with Phil to make sure we can get those types of things taken care of, because we don't want that in our houses, our housing, as well. So if there's ways that we can work with you to strengthen something that gives you more authority, such as like these shut-offs. If you've got it in your leases that if they have a extended water bill and they're gonna be shut off, and there's a checklist that you're trying to get someone out because they're not paying, hopefully that can be another thing that helps support you, I guess. I want to throw that out there, that if there's a way we can work together to make things stronger that support your businesses as this, that's the other piece to this as well. Okay, I mean, it's a two-way street, because we want you to be successful. We want nice properties for our tenants. We want to attract tenants that are supportive of jobs and advancements of businesses and growth. So it's important to us across the board, and we want a beautiful town. We have a beautiful town. And I know that during our strategic planning session, like Lisa was saying, the number one thing that came up was visible appearance and our housing stock. So,
I'd just like to say that our nuisance officer has made great strides since
Yes, he
he's come
has.
on board too. And I think that, we're looking at the individual homes and how we can attract and increase the visual appearance of our town. That's a big part of our comp plan this year, so it's not just you as landlords, it's individual homeowners that is so important that they clean up their properties and make Red Oak a more viable and beautiful place to live.
I have to think there is some type of a peer pressure because I believe that our town was the most beautiful it was right before Ragbri. So I think there is peer pressure that does trickle down. So would anybody disagree? Red Oak looked very nice for Ragbri, so there were a few properties. But that was it. So, and I do want to also compliment our nuisance officer. He is working very diligently. He's proactive. He tries to educate people so that they know what the violation is and then gives them a warning first. And so then if they continue, then he's following through. And as Lisa said, we're following through with how we can assess things onto property taxes and other things so that we actually are enforcing compliance. And I can assure you that Lisa is going to be that type of person. And I believe she's the best city administrator that Red Oak's going to have had at least for a long, long time. So. But she's also willing to work with you and try to find a solution. And I think that's one thing that makes Lisa really unique and perfect for us, so. And I appreciate Phil. He's also the same way. He knows what he has to do and I think he's willing to work with you if it's something minor as well. And Lisa mentioned in the beginning that these fees are really to kind of, they're set so that if you do have to if Phil does have to come back a second time, there won't be an additional fee if it's something minor. So. And you'll know what that is. I mean, obviously, if you've got insulation on your furnace, pilot light of your water heater or something like that, that probably is definitely going to warrant a second inspection. So, you know what those things are. So. Does anybody else have any other things? This is a time for you to speak and.
We'll stay after if you want to come up and ask us anything after as well.
All right, we thank you very much for coming. We appreciate you taking time out of your evening and appreciate that. So I do have to, with nothing else, I would call for an adjournment.